it occurred to me I haven't really explained fully about the principles of the concentric magnets and the polarization and how it all basically works. So I'll try to make it simple. Right, I'll zoom back a bit. Right. Right, this is the rotor. We'll call that the right rotor. And next to the right rotor we have the concentric 6, which is, well, I'll just simplify it by just having north-south, because depending on the polarity of the rotor, if we have a south field, then the south field will be biased this direction. So we would have south coming in and north would be coming out. And because of the equal forces on this rotor, because it's pulling on the rotor and it's also pushing on the rotor at the same time, we don't have any work being done because it doesn't feel like there's anything happening, right? Now, and I've got that cleared out of the way. But on this side, we have a positive south pole, which is being generated, and we have our coil. And I'm just going to use my little, I don't know, let's find something. Hang on. Right, I've just stuck some sticky foam on here, then I can move it if I need to. Now we have a south pole field coming in, which is sent through the iron and to generate power in our coil. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because in the middle we have another concentric, but it's not being controlled by a rotor. We have another north and south array. Now, normally the magnetic field on this side, when it's inactive, would be neutralized. It would be totally dead. But because we have a south field energized on this side, through the coil, it's going to pull on the north. So what happens is the north field will be energized and it will be pulled by the south. So we have an amplification of power through the coil. And because we're actually doing this, and this is just assuming we're using just one rotor on this side, the south field, right? The south pole. But that also assists the coil on the other side, because now we have south coming this way, sorry, north coming this way. We are also pushing south, because if remember, this is south here, south field is being pushed, and we are also pushing south on this side, which is being sent towards the other coil. But it's not doing that alone, because on the other side we have our other rotor, which is north. And because this field is north, what we have, what we actually have is a north pole which is actually being sent towards the coil. And that north pole is pulling on the south pole on this side. So we have a double gain, actually, because this switch is now being biased by both sides. On one side we have north being pulled this way, and on this side we have south being pulled this way. So we're actually, this concentric in the middle is actually being switched by the external outside concentrics, which are being energized by the rotors. So we actually have a times 2 gain. So we actually are moving towards our over unity objective. So we are doing very little work on the rotor, because remember, the rotor is seen north and south. It's actually pushing north and pulling south, so it doesn't feel like there's anything being done, because it's balanced, a seesaw balance, it's equalized. But on this side we have a strong north coming in, and that's attracted to south in the center concentric. We'll call that in the middle concentric, so we know where we are. But obviously when these are reversed, when the right rotor becomes north, then everything's switched around, and when the left rotor becomes south, then the whole thing flips. So this would become south on this side and north on this side. But we're just focusing on one polarization to keep it simple. But we get our AC, we get our alternating current simply by these fields being swapped around. And the only thing that's important is to get the maximum amount of gain between rotor on the right and getting the rotors on the right and the rotor on the left to be exactly opposite, and turning both these concentrics on at the same time. That is critical, because if not, then we're actually the whole system would work against itself. So, but as long as one's pulling and one's pushing, that is also balanced. So you see what I mean. And I actually found this in the previous build that I'd made, that by stacking extra magnets in the center, I saw a huge gain in magnetic flux and a huge voltage increase. The only reason I decided to rebuild this simply was the fact that I was seeing a loss. When I was drawing current from one coil, I noticed that the other coil dipped slightly, but there was still a lot of power, a lot of inductance unused in the design. And I realised that I wasn't getting good at close enough coupling, which is why I made this. Hang on, let's take this off. This is using steel half-cut washers. Now, this latest design, it's 8 concentric magnets, and this is the trigger side. This will actually go against, because in reality, in the real world, where I have my rotor, I am going to be having 2 of these. I'm going to be having the 6th concentric, which is this one. And that's going to be driving through a series of smaller washers. Oops, the larger 8 concentric. Now, just a minute. There's a lot of magnetism here. I'm trying to get this stable. Now, the smaller 6 concentric is going to be biasing the larger 8 concentric. But instead of a ball bearing, which sends the magnetic field out in a wide field, in a wider direction, I'm going to be using a steel washer. The washer is going to be sitting on the very tips of the edges of the steel washers. And by doing it like this, I found out that the magnetic field is much more focused in a flat plane, in an elevated direction, which is what we want, because our coils are going to be sitting on this side. The coil, which is this item, the yellow item there, will then be energized, and then we'll have another one of these large ones in the center. And in the center, there will be a washer on each side. So, we should see a huge improvement. The previous design, I would say, was 25% efficient, but with this newer design, we should get closer to 80% efficiency, and I'm hoping, and I'm really convinced, that instead of 5 volts per coil, which I was getting previously, I should see at least 12 to 15 volts per coil. And if that's the case, and remember previously I was getting 50 milliamps per coil, short circuit, well, not totally short circuit, but loaded down with the meter, which is good enough. So if I can get 15 volts, then I should be seeing somewhere in the region of 150 to 200 milliamps. And this whole circuit previously was being driven by 90 milliamps. Now, if that's the case, we've got over unity. Fingers crossed. And there's something else I wanted to add. I made my steel couplers out of washers, as you recall, a washer that's cut in half and then glued together. Now, initially, when the Concentric, there's no magnets in here actually at the moment, but it's just to demonstrate. The couplers are actually inside the Concentric. Now, the magnet's in the base, in the slot, and when we actually bias the washer on this side where our fingers are, the magnetic field that's in the base of the Concentric is also pushed and carried along and adds to the magnetic field, and we have a substantial gain on the output on this side here. Now let's just go back to the drawing. Now, when I originally started to experiment, I actually cut some slots into the steel, but the magnetic field was having a bit of a hard time, because the magnetic field was having to basically I best use something that's not magnetic, was having to go all the way around, and carrying that additional magnetic field from the Concentric forward was having less effect, so I wasn't seeing much of a gain. In fact, the magnetic field was colliding with the Concentric magnetic field, and there was quite a large amount of cancellation, so the magnetic field was actually becoming equal or not really that much great on the output. So I went back to the drawing board and I cut a V out of the steel, and this actually had the effect of amplification, because now we were pushing the magnetic field at the point here at right angles at cross section, so the magnetic field wasn't cancelling itself out anymore, instead it was carrying it forward with it. So the lines of flux are actually being added to, and that's why I drew a thicker line, because we actually have twice the gain, twice the magnetic field. So basically, if you have three magnets here, and my pen's not working, you also need three magnets over here. That is because you have to equalize the magnetic flux so that they add to. Because if you have a stronger magnetic field on this side and you pull the field off, turn the field off and pull it this way, you're going to have an imbalance on this side. In fact, you're going to be pulling some of the field on this side, which you don't want to be doing. You want this neutral when it's turned off. So you have equal amount of flux on this side as here. So you've got three magnets. Say that's south. Let's say this is south. And this is also south. Then you will have, say, 2 times the magnetic flux on this side. But because we're using magnetic field from the static concentric, the amount of lens effect that slows the rotors down is minimized and is actually negated simply because, remember, that there's there's 8 of these and 4 of them are south and 4 of them are north. So the actual rotor on this side is balanced, so it's seen north and south. But there will be a small amount of lensing effect that does backtrack through the circuit. There always will be. But as long as we can have a huge gain, sufficient amplification, we should be able to exceed that deficit and become over unity. That is the objective. So if we have enough amplification using concentrics, we should be able to achieve it. Anyway, thank you for watching.